Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into a story that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a Hollywood political thriller. We're talking about a single, shadowy act of treachery, a betrayal that didn't just decide the outcome of one battle, but literally altered the destiny of one of the wealthiest nations on Earth for nearly 2 centuries. It's a tale of greed, cunning, and ultimately the resilience of a people fighting to reclaim their sovereignty.
Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did a modest little group of merchants, just a simple corporate trading company, manage to conquer an entire subcontinent? I mean, when you look back at the 190-year history of British colonial rule in India, it wasn't the result of some massive, overwhelming military invasion right from the start. No, it was actually the catastrophic fallout of one very specific, secret backroom deal. But to really grasp how that happened, we gotta rewind and look at what India was actually like before the British even showed up.
Section 1. The Golden Prize.
So, before the 1600s, India wasn't just another spot on the map. It was the ultimate global prize. We're setting the stakes here for a heist of unprecedented proportions. Just look at the stark contrast. On the left, you've got India under the Mughal Empire, an absolute economic powerhouse, globally famous for the hub for spices, silk, and gold. And on the right, the English East India Company. Formed on December 31st, 1600. They showed up by sea with a pretty humble request. They just wanted permission to trade. They were a corporation looking to make a quick profit, nothing more. Or at least so it seemed.
Section 2. Traders turn to rulers. But as time went on, the East India Company realized something absolutely crucial. Sure, trading goods was profitable, but playing politics? Well, that could yield an entire empire. Starting from coastal centers in Surat, Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta, they sat back and watched the mighty Mughal Empire begin to fracture in the early 1700s. As regional kings and nawabs started squabbling among themselves for power, the company saw this incredible opportunity. They stopped being just simple merchants and morphed into opportunists. You know, they'd back one local ruler with weapons or cash and then completely flip sides when it suited them better. Slowly but surely, they were transforming those innocent coastal trading posts into powerful seats of political influence.
Section 3. Mir Jafar's treachery.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that by the mid-1700s, the company had its eyes firmly set on Bengal. And Bengal was arguably the wealthiest province in all of India, just incredibly rich in agriculture, trade, and sheer capital. But in 1756, a young Nawab named Siraj-ud-Dowlah took power, and he absolutely refused to let the East India Company just walk all over his territory. So what does the company do? They didn't want a fair fight, no way. Instead, they reached into the shadows and made a secret, treasonous promise to the Nawab's very own military commander, Mir Jafar. The deal was simple: support us, and you become the Nawab of Bengal. And Mir Jafar, he agreed.
This shady deal finally came to a head on June 23, 1757, at the Battle of Plassey. Now, on paper, the odds were heavily in favor of the Nawab. Siraj-ud-Dowlah had a massive army, while the East India Company's forces were tiny in comparison. But here's the thing. Numbers didn't matter, because the fight was entirely rigged. The moment the battle kicked off, Mir Jafar and his huge contingent of soldiers simply stood down. They refused to fight. Because of this monumental betrayal, the Nawab's army completely collapsed. The East India Company took the win, and that exact stolen moment officially laid the foundation for British political power in India.
Section 4. The domino effect. And because of that single betrayal at Plassey, it was like the ultimate domino effect. The entire subcontinent started to topple, and the pace of this conquest was just staggering. In 1764, the company defeated a massive joint Indian army at the Battle of Buxar. Then, by 1765, they forced the Mughal emperor to hand over Diwani rights. That essentially gave them direct power to collect taxes across Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. They brought in the permanent settlement in 1793, which just crushed farmers with heavy taxes. And then came these really aggressive policies, like Lord Wellesley's Subsidiary Alliance and Lord Dalhousie's Doctrine of Lapse. These were used to basically swallow up independent states like Jhansi, Nagpur, and Awadh. They even defeated the Sikh Empire in Punjab by 1849, relentlessly expanding this iron grip that all started with a single bribe.
Of course, the human cost of all this was absolutely devastating. Early Indian leaders, like Dadabhai Naoroji, identified this as the drain of wealth. And it's just this tragic irony, really. The nation that was once the wealthiest in the world, the very wealth that tempted the company to sail over in the first place, was now being systematically hollowed out. India's vast resources flowed straight to England to feed their hungry industrial machines, while Indian farmers, weavers, and just everyday citizens were plunged into crushing poverty, forced to pay these totally exorbitant taxes.
Section 5. A century of uprisings.
Well, exactly 100 years after that betrayal at Plassey, the boiling anger of the entire subcontinent just exploded. The year 1857 marks what is widely known as the First War of Independence. The immediate spark was actually the introduction of new Enfield rifle cartridges, which deeply offended the religious sensibilities of both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. But what started with Mangal Pandey's fierce defiance in Barrackpore quickly spread like wildfire into a massive rebellion. You had soldiers, farmers, and even royalty uniting. Leaders like the legendary Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi fought fiercely on the battlefield, and the rebels even declared the Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader. But ultimately, because they lacked a unified leadership across all the different regions, and because the British just had vastly superior resources, this massive revolt was brutally crushed.
But here's the kicker. 1857 changed everything. It forced the British government's hand. In 1858, the East India Company's corporate rule officially ended, and the British Crown stepped in, bringing India directly under the rule of Queen Victoria. So sure, the corporate branding changed, but the harsh reality for everyday Indians, that stayed exactly the same. They were still a subjugated people, heavily taxed and completely denied equal rights, all stemming back to that initial stolen foothold in Bengal.
Section 6. The long road to freedom. As time went on and education spread, a really organized sense of nationalism began to rise. The Indian National Congress was formed in 1885, and by 1905, movements like Swadeshi had folks boycotting foreign goods left and right. But the fight for freedom truly shifted into a massive nationwide movement when Mahatma Gandhi returned in 1915. Following the absolutely horrific Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, Gandhi united millions and strategically escalated the pushback. He started with these crucial local wins for farmers in Champaran and Kheda. Then came the massive non-cooperation movement in 1920. In 1930, he marched 390 kilometers to break the salt law during the famous Dandi March. And finally, in 1942, he launched the decisive Quit India movement with a very clear ultimate mandate: do or die.
And this brilliantly illustrates that the struggle wasn't purely nonviolent. There was a parallel, fiercely revolutionary path as well. A lot of young revolutionaries deeply believed that the British would only respect a direct, forceful challenge to grant Purna Swaraj, the complete independence that the Congress had demanded in 1929. We see this bold defiance in the 1925 Kakori train action. We see it in the ultimate, tragic sacrifice of young heroes like Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru, who willingly faced the gallows to wake up the nation's youth. And we see it in Chandrasekhar Azad's defiant last stand, absolutely refusing to be captured alive by the British.
That revolutionary spirit really reached a fever pitch during World War II, thanks to Subhash Chandra Bose. Bose pulled off this daring escape right from under British surveillance in India, traveling abroad to form the Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army. His famous mandate was absolutely electric: give me blood and I will give you freedom. He proved without a doubt that Indians were more than willing to organize militarily and actively fight for their liberation on the global stage.
So by the mid-1940s, the writing was pretty much on the wall for the British Empire. World War II had left Britain basically bankrupt both financially and militarily. And when the British actually tried to prosecute the captured Indian National Army soldiers, the ANI trials just sparked massive, unified public outrage across the entire country. But the final nail in the coffin? That would be the 1946 Royal Indian Navy Mutiny. I mean, when your own military begins to revolt against you, the colonial masters know their time is officially up. The empire that was built on a rigged battle was finally collapsing in on itself.
And so freedom was finally achieved. But we have to acknowledge that it was a profoundly bittersweet victory. After nearly 2 centuries of relentless struggle, the British agreed to leave. But through the Mountbatten Plan, they drew the Radcliffe Line, brutally dividing the subcontinent into 2 independent nations, India and Pakistan. This partition in August 1947 resulted in history's largest mass migration, and it was marked by just horrific violence and the heartbreaking displacement of millions from their ancestral homes.
This newly independent nation faced absolutely unimaginable challenges right out of the gate, but it stood resilient. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel pulled off the monumental task of politically integrating over 500 diverse princely states into the Indian Union. Meanwhile, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar led the painstakingly detailed process of drafting the nation's foundational laws. And on January 26, 1950, the Constitution was officially enacted, cementing India as a sovereign democratic republic.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound thought to wrap up this explainer. Think back to exactly where we started. If a single selfish act of treachery by Mir Jafar at the Battle of Plassey, back in 1757, could cost a brilliant, unimaginably wealthy nation nearly 200 years of its freedom, well, what is the ongoing price of protecting that hard-fought freedom today? It's just an incredible story of immense loss, astounding resilience, and the sheer power of a united people. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the history that shaped modern India. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.